welcome to Puck Junk Podcast number 10. Can you believe it? Number 10. And it only took us, 10 months to do it?
At least.
But that's neither here nor there. The important thing is that we're doing this and you're listening to us, hopefully listening or half listening, as we talk about some recent events in the NHL. I'm Sal Berry of PuckJunk.com. Along with me is Tim, the real DFG, on Twitter. I think we'll start with the Stadium Series, or you had another name for it, Tim.
The destruction of the Blackhawks.
That was not a fun game to watch as somebody who likes the Blackhawks, although I think after that game, they should have just given John Torchetti, the interim coach of the Wild, they should have just given him a contract on the spot and just say, okay, you guys beat the Blackhawks, here's your contract extension, you are the coach until the end of the season at least, if not longer. Because, hey, you beat the Blackhawks by that much of a margin on NBC in front of 50,000 people or whatever. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I don't understand why they haven't just gone ahead and done that. I mean, he took over. They go on a 3-4 game win streak. They've cleaned up their gameplay. If you've actually watched the Wild in the last few games, they look like a totally different team. They're determined. They stay with it. It's all get up and go for those guys. So I don't know if the coach is the reason for that, but he sure seems to be.
Well, a lot of times when you have a coaching change, that's a catalyst for the players to try harder because all of a sudden they have a new boss to impress. So all of a sudden it's like, if you are not in the good graces of the boss, you have a chance to reprove yourself right now. And if you are underperforming, it's like, okay, I better shape up. So that gives motivation to everybody, the underperformers, the overperformers, the people who are slumping, the people who are in the doghouse. I think another thing, though, is that the Wild, they played, up until this point, under Torchetti, they played some of the weaker teams in the league. So it was kind of nice for them for Torchetti at least to, have those games first and not just like, okay, you're going to start against a really hard team.
Yeah, it definitely helps to have weaker competition. But like I said, just seeing them and watching them play, they look like a totally different squad out there. A lot more energy.
Yeah, definitely. The Hawks looked sluggish.
Yeah, what was with that? That didn't even look like the Hawks out there on the ice. They were slow up and down the ice. You rarely saw Kane or Taves even involved in a play, at least from an impactful standpoint. And, man, it was just bad errant pass after errant pass, and the puck was bouncing around all over the place. I don't know, was it the ice condition maybe? It did start to snow a little bit there in the first period, and the ice got a little choppy, but, wow. I didn't think I was watching the Hawks.
Well, Jonathan Taves did join Twitter on Sunday, so maybe he was distracted by monitoring how many followers he was getting, by the minute. I mean, that morning he had like 12,000 followers, and by the end of the game he had like 50,000 followers, and now it's probably something ridiculous. I don't even know. So that could have been, not really. I'm just kidding.
Wish I had that many.
Yeah, I know. Hey, you know what? I'm at 295 Twitter followers, and Marian Hossa is at 495 goals. And so I was joking to myself, like, am I going to get to 300 Twitter followers before Marian Hossa gets to 500 goals? And now that Hossa's injured, it seems like I might actually hit my milestone before he hits his milestone. And I'm not taking any joy in his injury because, just look at how terrible the team was.
Yeah.
Without him, or, at least today.
That was something. Never expected to see that on live TV.
I want to talk about yesterday. Now, I know you didn't watch the alumni game. I did. Growing up a Blackhawk fan, and growing up seeing the North Stars play the Hawks 8 times a season back in the day, back in the North Division, it was cool to see the alumni game, and I had kind of an epiphany. I know we talked about the All-Star game in our last podcast. We both enjoyed the 3-on-3 format, but I think we both pretty much agreed that All-Star games are generally pretty boring unless you're a kid. So I think what excites me is the alumni games, because then we get to see the guys that we grew up with. I guess because it was the Blackhawks, I appreciated it more. But even like a couple years ago when you had the Leafs Red Wings alumni, I watched that and I'm just like, oh yeah, I remember this guy, I remember that guy, and we get excited about it. It's not a great game, like as far as hockey goes, but it's fun, and I think that's what's important. I had fun watching the Blackhawk North Stars. Well, they call it the Minnesota team, but it was former North Stars or former Minnesota Wild, but they were wearing North Star jerseys. They had a Wild patch on their sleeve or on their shoulder. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing a lot of the former Blackhawks and even, to a lesser extent, a lot of the former North Stars out there. I mean, Dennis Savard and Dino Ciccarelli even got into like a mock fight because there was a joke about their fight back in the 80s, like the super flyweight division fight between Savard and Ciccarelli. But anyways, what do you think about alumni games?
I've seen a few of them before. So even though I didn't see yesterday's game, I've watched the alumni games in the past, and they're fun to see because you get the old guys out there, and you get to see which ones still have some motor under them and which ones are need to hang up the skates permanently. But there's some guys that they throw out there on the ice that haven't been retired that long, and can still go out there and put the puck in the net. I think what was the last one before? Was it before the All-Star game? Alex Kovalev played in it, and I mean he was firing the shot from the point. It looked like he could be out there playing now. So I mean they are fun. I enjoyed watching the Penguins play when they had an alumni game a few years back. That was a lot of fun because you get to see the old players that you remember as a kid, and see them strap on the skates and go do it one more time out there. And I think the players have a lot of fun when they do it too. It's a good time for them to get out there, and that camaraderie. You may not have been on the same team as these guys for very long, but the hockey family is pretty extended, and you see that in these events.
Yeah, you were right about the younger guys obviously like dominating those kinds of games. Like Andrew Brunette got a goal for the North Stars alumni, and the first thing I said to myself is, I thought he was in the KHL. Like I was surprised that, oh, you're retired and you're an alumni now. I figured you were still kicking around in some European league. I know Jamal Myers is retired. He's a Blackhawk studio analyst. I guess he's Steve Conroyd's backup, but he and Conroyd were both out there playing. Murray Bannerman was playing. Dennis Savard was playing. Roenick was playing. He was actually pretty funny because he joked about how out of breath he was and out of shape he was. Gilles Milach of North Stars fame, but he also played, ended his career with the Penguins.
Right. He
was out there at like 64 years old, and he did all right. He got a poke check on Roenick.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was impressed. Like he did great for a guy in his 60s. I was so happy for him because I remember a couple years ago, I forgot who it was. I want to say it was like someone like Mike Pelmetier or somebody from the 70s, and they like played one shift, they made one save, and then they went to the bench for like a change on the fly for like the other goalie to come out and replace him, and they're like, okay, that's it, I'm done. Like I made my one save and I'm happy. So the fact that Milach played for half a game, I was impressed. He did well. Don Beaupre did well. Murray Bannerman and Jimmy Waite, all of them did. Just
like you said, I've seen some of them in the past where guys come to the bench. They haven't even been on the ice that long, and they're just gassed. You can see they're heaving. They need the oxygen tanks hooked up.
I enjoyed that. I'm actually interested to see how the upcoming Colorado Avalanche Detroit Red Wings alumni game goes, and this is with me not even looking at the rosters, so I don't even know who's going to be in it. I don't care. I'm going to watch it anyway. But the thing is that like that was still pretty recent. I mean, 20 years ago it's a long time, but it's not like, I think it's a little different like when you hit 60 years old and you're like, oh yeah, I used to be a pain in my ass when I was in my 20s and patrolling the blue line, and now we're all old men with grandchildren, and what a great time we had. Whereas like you look at like guys like Patrick Waugh, who said, I don't want to do anything with those Red Wings. I know it's an alumni game and we're supposed to play against them and stuff, but I don't want to socialize with them. And he meant it too.
I happened to glance a couple of the names, and I did see Claude Lemieux's name was on there, and I saw Sakic was on there, and Ray Bourque's name was on there, so that'll be an interesting game.
Ray Bourque, perhaps the most famous rental in NHL history.
He got his cup.
Yeah, he did play a full season for them. It wasn't just for that playoff run the previous year, but yeah, perhaps the most famous rental that I could think of. I'll still watch it. I'll still be happy to, just to see what happens and to see who shows up and just see how the game goes, because they're always kind of fun. And it's also kind of neat to just see, like, the players, obviously the players that you grew up watching, but I also even have reverence for the guys that were before my time. Now, I would probably not going to get too many Colorado Avalanche before my time because, they they existed, they 95, so I was like 20, so yeah, be kind of funny if they brought in like an old Nordique, but, that's not going to happen, like Peter Stastny just cuz, right? Or Michel Goulet just cuz.
Well, the question is whether it is a team game or it's a franchise game. Do the players follow the franchise or do they follow just the team itself?
You know what? I'm glad you brought this up because I hate the F word. I hate the franchise word. When they talk about franchise history, when they talk about Mike Modano in Dallas and Minnesota franchise history, okay, Minnesota gets even more clouded when you have a team in Minnesota now that's not the North Stars. But let's backtrack. Let's just say like the Colorado-Quebec franchise history. So when they say Joe Sakic is the all-time leading scorer for the Colorado/Quebec history, the people in Colorado probably don't give a shit about the team's time in Quebec. Like, oh, great, this record was set in the 80s by Peter Stastny or whatever. I don't know. I can't see that mattering to anyone. Like, oh, well, this guy scored 50 goals and 100 points back when the team was in a different country halfway across the continent, right? Like, people only care about, like, what happens in their city. That's why they follow that team, I think it's a tough sell. Whenever they say franchise, my eyes just glaze over. I'm like, oh, whatever. People just want to prove that, yes, the New Jersey Devils were at one time the Colorado Rockies. Bravo for remembering that bit of trivia. But, like, Lanny McDonald never played for the New Jersey Devils. So even if he is, like, the all-time whatever in, like, franchise history, who cares?
Because he never played for the current incarnation of the team?
Right, exactly. I think you just need to cut the cord. I think it needs to be based on the city.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What about Winnipeg?
I think that Jets 2.0 should inherit all the old records.
What about Atlanta? Do you just like make those numbers disappear?
Who cares? Someone's keeping track of it. It's still written down. It's still a record or whatever, but who cares, right? Like, the people in Winnipeg right now, I would almost guarantee that they don't care about the team years from Atlanta. They care more about their Jets from the 70s and 80s and 90s than they do about the Atlanta Thrashers.
I'd probably agree with that. But that's an interesting idea.
I think when they talk about franchise history, like, I actually, like, and that's why I actually thought that the North Stars-Wild alumni team was such a great idea. Because they didn't say, oh, well, we're going to also include some guys from the Dallas Stars, because that's like a middle finger to the people in Minnesota. Like, hey, remember us? We're the team that, like, went on to win championships after we left your sorry-ass town, right?
I guess then, using that theory, then every team that's ever existed in Colorado should be eligible to play in this next alumni game.
Well, they do kind of look a little bit like Rockies jerseys, but, then again, I guess they're just using that C from the state flag.
So we dig up some old Rockies players and throw them on the ice?
No, you get Don Cherry as the coach for the alumni team. You get Hardy Astrom in net. Don Cherry coached the Rockies for one season. He hated it. I watched on Netflix the Don Cherry story. It was actually a 2-part miniseries that was like 4 hours, and then they made a sequel called The Wrath of Grapes, which was another 2-part 4-hour miniseries, and it actually detailed his year in Colorado and just how terrible it was, and about how bad the goaltending was that he had that year. And so, yeah, I'd love to see Don out there as the celebrity or the alumni coach for Colorado.
That would be interesting.
And then again, I don't know. The small percentage of hockey fans that actually care to know that, it probably wouldn't outweigh how stupid it is to have him coach a game like that, because, that he doesn't know any of the players. Like, at least with, like, this current alumni game, at least, like, the coaches were, like, Tony Esposito and Pat Foley, the play-by-play announcer.
Oh, yeah.
So it was neat because Foley had, he knew a lot of these guys from his years behind the microphone, and Tony Esposito knew pretty much everyone else. I mean, Foley had grown up watching a lot of those guys, but a lot of the older guys like Cliff Coral and them, they played with Tony O. That was a better idea than just like, hey, we're gonna put in this coach for ironic reasons.
Oh, you could always have Mike Milbury be the official coach of every alumni team.
Oh, Milbury. Yeah, no, I like him better. I like him better up in the broadcast booth taking pot shots at things that he doesn't like.
I like him better when he stays home.
Yeah, well, I don't know. In Jeremy Roenick's second book, he actually says, Milbury is supposed to play the heavy in these broadcasts, and that he actually relishes being like the naysayer. No surprise there.
Yeah, no surprise.
It was kind of funny because, like, a couple of years back, he would do both NBC games and he'd also do Hockey Night in Canada. And I don't know, like, maybe their coverage was just a little too positive or whatnot. And I love Hockey Night in Canada, and I like the NBC coverage.
Definitely Hockey Night in Canada and the guys on THN and even the NHL Network. They treat play-by-play and doing stats and highlights a lot differently than NBC does. That's for sure.
In what way?
Like you said, maybe it was too positive. They talk about hockey for hockey's sake. I mean, it's a lifestyle for them.
Right.
The NBC guys, I don't know.
You always feel like they're trying to explain things to people, right?
Yes. They think we're stupid. They have to explain it because for some reason or another, they have to turn it into every other sport that's out there with the just over-the-top, overblown everything and make mountains out of molehills, out of things that are just commonplace.
The one thing that bothers me about every outdoor game, I will say this, the one thing that bothers me is they always talk about players going back to their roots, where it all began, playing outdoors.
Pond hockey.
Huh?
Pond hockey. That's where it all started.
You know what? In 50 years from now, all the NHL games are going to be outdoors, and they're going to have something called the Indoor Classic, where players are going to talk about how they remember going to public skates as a 5-year-old and learning how to skate on an indoor sheet of ice, and how this just really brings them back to their days of, like, artificial ice that was well maintained and had better quality and everything, and instead of all these outdoor games that they're doing. But then again, if they're doing every game is outdoors and they're, selling 50,000 or 60,000 tickets, that's better.
Everything comes full circle at some point.
The one thing I get tired of is the whole, getting back to their roots, like it's this mystic.
They got to have something to talk about.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, they should just say, wow, we sold a lot of tickets. Like, what would normally be a $50 ticket is now a $200 ticket. Is this awesome or what?
Yeah, you get to watch a hockey game from about 750 feet farther back.
Yeah, I know. That's sign me up. And that and some $10 beers and we're set. Hey, let's talk about, even though this is old news, I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. Dennis Wideman, his hit on linesman Don Henderson, and then his subsequent 20-game suspension. You know what? Every time I watch the clip, it makes me mad for a couple of reasons. It makes me mad that Wideman got away with it in the first place, that he wasn't kicked out of the game. It makes me mad that nobody seemed remorseful about it at the time. Like, okay, maybe they weren't watching him, but you watch those Nashville Predators players on the bench, and he goes and cross-checks the linesman from behind, and the players jump up like, whoa, dude, what the hell, right? Like, it surprised, it was shocking and surprising. And I think it was a little embarrassing that, that the other referees, and I don't know the reasoning behind it, maybe they didn't see it, maybe they didn't, I don't know, but they weren't just like, you know what, you're out of here. They got those little iPads, they can watch replays. In
pretty much any sport, you touch a ref, you're gone.
Right.
Or there's at least some type of penalty.
Right.
This thing is a mess. It's a mess regardless of what side you believe or what you think. It's just straight up a mess. I think that's what everybody can agree, because you have this whole situation where He gets a 20-game suspension. The suspension gets upheld by the commissioner of the league. And then because of the collective bargaining agreement, he can actually appeal it to a third party, which supposedly he is, and it's coming up next Thursday, I think, is when the next hearing is supposed to take place. But beyond all that, you look at all the so-called evidence that's come out since then and all the testimonies of everybody that's talked about the whole situation. It's completely opposite of what the league has instilled over the last couple years with player safety and trying to put these guys through concussion protocols and everything else. I mean, look, you saw what happened. He got hit. He got cracked. Mm-hmm. He goes up to one knee. He stands up. He skates off the ice. He cross-checks the ref in the back and just nonchalantly just goes onto the bench and sits down. And, you see the trainer come up to him and say something to him. But 2 minutes later, he's back out on the ice and he finishes the game. So, okay, if somebody is actually feeling the effects of a concussion, the trainer's going to take him back to the dressing room, what do they call it, the quiet room. They're going to take him back to the quiet room. They're going to run him through a whole battery of tests. And if he passes, then sure, comes back out on the ice. But he never left the bench. And he went back out and he played. So then after the game's over, he does the interview and he makes really no mention of the fact that he might have been dazed and confused or got a hit to the head or had a concussion or anything else. Then in the hearing, he turns around and says, well, somebody told him to say all that to try to, minimize the effects of it or, not throw off the press or whatever he was trying to do, but somebody coaxed him into doing it. Come on. That's not how that works. Shame on him for doing that and not issuing an apology or whatever, he needed to do. But also the team handled it wrong because it shouldn't have been his choice. He should have come off, been tested like everybody else. It shouldn't have been his decision whether he wanted to stay in the game or not. Because then you turn around and you use that excuse, oh, I was concussed. I didn't know what I was doing. Come on. Really?
It would have been better from a defensive standpoint, if they had done the concussion protocol and then figured out he was concussed or said he was concussed, then I think then it could have justified the actions. Sure. I'm not saying it's justified by any means. I still think it's deplorable.
Well, it's not justified. It's not justified at all, but it at least could have been explained a little better.
Right.
I'm the last person that's going to jump to the defense of Gary Bettman. But the things that he said in his decision to uphold that suspension were flat out true. Okay, let's say he was concussed. But still, does that give him any excuse to go and strike a referee? If you're concussed and you're skating off the ice, you obviously have enough cognitive ability to get off of the ice. I don't think any person, whether they got hit in the head or not, are going to openly just go off and attack somebody that's just standing there doing nothing. The guy wasn't even looking at him. He had his back to him.
Yeah, and I think the thing is this is what it seemed like to me. It seemed like Wideman got hit. He got creamed in the corner. He got up and he seemed pissed that that the other guy didn't get a penalty because of that. So to me, it looked like he was retaliating at the referee because he had been hit, he had been hurt, and it's like, oh, you jerk, you didn't call that. Boom, right?
Well, that's exactly it. That was his mannerism the whole time, like skating off. He looked like it hurt, but he still looked coherent enough, just pissed. So, I agree.
Now, here's the only thing that I want to add into this, because a couple years ago, so I play beer league hockey. I've been learning how to play hockey the last couple of years. I've been at it for about 2.5 years now. I play on a team. And I remember a game, and unfortunately I didn't have a good view of this, probably fortunately, because I would have reacted differently. But one of my players was knocked out. Like the other player came across the ice, got his elbow up, and clipped my teammate in the helmet. The reason why I didn't see it, I was on the ice, but there was a player directly, or I don't know if it was a player or the referee. Somebody was directly in front of me, so I was kind of like, my vision was obscured from seeing my teammate get hit. So he fell down. We got him back up. He was all right. He played the rest of the game. He joked around with us after the game in the locker room. You know, he made a comment, like I made a comment, like, "Are you okay? You got hit in the head?" And he's just like, "I got a hard head. I'm fine, right?" Well, the next day he starts getting concussion symptoms. The next day he starts feeling nauseous. His head starts feeling cloudy. He starts feeling sick. He had those symptoms for maybe 5 or 6 days. He saw the doctor the next day, 2 days after, and they're like, "Yeah, you have a low-grade concussion." So now I say to him, I'm like, "Well, you were playing with the concussion." And he's just like, he's like, "Dude, I don't remember anything after getting hit." He says, "I don't remember how I got home," which is scary because he drove home himself. But, here it was after, because I also said, "Oh yeah, the other player apologized to you," like, after the game. He's like, I don't remember that either." He's like, I'm like, "You don't remember joking around with us in the locker room?" He's like, "Nope." He didn't remember any of that stuff. So, I can kind of see how Wideman could say, "I was hit and I don't remember any of that," and how you don't feel those effects right away. Because like I said, my friend was able, and again, this is beer league, not NHL, but he was able to finish the game, joke around with us and whatnot, and then the next day he was just like, "I don't remember any of that." So that's part of it. But the thing is that, like, if my friend had done something terrible after he was concussed, he would have felt bad about it. And I think that's the whole thing. Like, Wideman shows no remorse. He sent that text message to whomever saying, "The only reason why I'm doing this is because of the stupid media and the stupid referees," or whatever. And, it just seems like he doesn't care. And I think that's what's killing him here. That's what's pretty much killing his appeal. And this next one will be great, because I'd love to see what this third-party independent arbiter has to say. I want to read that. I want to read the release from that. Like, "No, you are a bad boy. You take your suspension and be glad you didn't do anything more, terrible than that."
Well, and, this is the first time that the NHLPA's exercised that option to do so. So having a non-hockey person make a hockey decision, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, seems like whenever that happens, the player ends up spending a night in jail, right? Whenever a non-hockey person...
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's ridiculous. Like, when you get when you say, "Well, on the street that would be a criminal act, but in hockey it's just part of hockey."
I don't know. It's a bad situation one way or another. I think when it all said and done, regardless of whether he serves a 20-game suspension or it gets lowered to something else, I think you're going to see some fallout with the team too, with the way they've handled it. So,
yeah, someone's got to take the blame for that.
Yep.
Let's end on some good news. Jaromir Jagr, have you heard of him?
Yeah, that kid can play.
Yeah, he's probably, I don't think he's a kid. He's older than... Oh, happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
We're at 39 for the first time?
I turned 21.
Ah, for the 18th time.
For the third time, actually. So, yeah, so...
So Yags just turned 44 the other day.
44 years old, and he passed Brett Hull on the all-time goal scoring to take over, was it third place now?
The third place, yes. Yeah. So he's got 742 goals right now, and Gordie Howe is, 800 or 801?
801.
Yeah. 801. So Jagr said the other day, he says he's having fun, and he feels like he could still play, and why can't he still play? I mean, not why can't he, but, if I still feel like playing, I'm going to keep playing, and he seems to have, even though it's funny because he still puts up a lot of offense for the Panthers, but, he's comfortable being that second line player. He doesn't have to be the first line everything all the time.
He knows he's not the fastest guy anymore. The interesting thing with that is, yeah, he doesn't have the speed that he had when he was, in the early 90s or late 90s or even early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still better than half the guys out there on the ice. he can still make you look like a fool with the moves that he makes and just his on-ice presence and the way he's able to put the puck exactly wherever he wills it to be. The guy still has that magic. It just amazes me that part of his game has never really diminished. And he's been a huge asset for Florida, with those young players down there, being able to be a mentor for them and also being able to contribute. I mean, Florida, pull him off that team, and Florida would still be good, but they'd be nowhere near where they are right now.
I think it's pretty cool that he's played for so long. I think, part of it is nostalgia because, of course, I remember him breaking into the league, and I was, a teenager, and I was excited, and, just to especially, like, at that point in my life, I was just getting into hockey. Like, I had only been into it for about 2 years at that point. So still, everything was, like, new and exciting to me. And, like, every time, like, a new batch of rookies made it into the NHL, you had really high expectations for them. And I think as you get a little older, you realize, okay, not everybody's going to make the cut. But it's exciting to say, like, yeah, I remember that guy when I was 15. And I remember him playing for the Penguins. And I remember, like, just how awesome he was then. And then even now, he's not the same player, but he's a different player, and he's still a great player. And I think that there's something exciting about that. And I remember watching Gretzky surpass Gordie Howe on the all-time scoring list. I remember watching that game, and I really want to try to make sure that I watch the game where Jagr, because he's 5 points away from tying Howe. So I want to see that game. I don't think they'll make as big of a deal about it that like when Gretzky did it because it seemed so unattainable. But I'm excited about that. I'm excited about seeing some of these marks eclipsed.
What's fun for me is here's a guy that, like you say, you grew up watching, living in Pittsburgh, growing up in Pittsburgh area. When the Penguins ended up getting Jagr and bringing him onto the team, the guy didn't speak English. First of all, he was young. Everybody knows the famous mullet that he had back then and still sort of has now. But he was the first big prospect that we landed since Mario Lemieux. And to have that amount of pressure on your shoulders coming into the NHL, knowing that you have to play in the shadow of one of the greatest players to ever put on skates, and yet all these comparisons are made time and time again, and before you're a year into your career, you already have a Stanley Cup, and then you have another one, and then you're on the highest scoring team and one of the best teams in the league the next year. And it's like, he had a lot of those luxuries in the beginning to play for decent teams and to play with a lot of guys that are Hall of Famers now. And I think that helped him develop his game because he was always trying to be that one step ahead of everybody else. Because, when you go out there and you're playing with the best, you got to up your game. And I think that's what he did. Playing all those years with Mario Lemieux and played for a while with, Paul Coffey and Ron Francis and Larry Murphy and, all these Hall of Famers. There were tons of guys on those teams. Brian Trottier in the beginning. The list goes on. And he got the opportunity to play with all these guys. And just the fact that he's one of the only guys from my youth that's actually still on the ice today. That to me is amazing. It's
amazing, and it's also a little sad because there's very few players left that we could say we remember from, I was a kid, or I was a young man, or I was a teenager, or whatnot. But, that's just part of growing up. Jagr's 5 points back from Gordie Howe, and then you look at Mark, I overstayed my welcome, Messier, and he has 1,887 points. So I think it's fair to say that Jagr will catch him and surpass him and move into that second all-time spot. Within, if he's 1845, 55, 65, 70, 85. So he's about 42 points back from tying him. So, I mean, he might not get it this year. He might get that next year.
Yeah, if he continues at the pace that he's going and he decides to come back again next year, which I don't see any reason why he wouldn't, very easily, he can take down those records.
I'm looking now at another thing. You look at Jagr, and he played 3 seasons in the KHL.
Is this the big what-if question?
The big what-if question, because now I'm looking at his stats in Europe, and, of course, obviously the KHL is, it's argued whether it's better than the AHL or not better than the AHL, but it's comparable. So he put up about the same numbers as he was putting up. He put up lower numbers, actually. But, it was over less games per season. But I don't know. I mean, it's safe to say that, just conservatively, you could say he would have maybe scored 30 points a season for those 3 seasons. It could be another 100 points, maybe more than that, 120. So then you get to the what if. What if he had stayed?
Honestly, if you look at his career stats, I mean, other than what year was that, where he split between Dallas and Boston a few years back. I mean, he's scored 35 to 40 points at least a year. Leaving him in the NHL to play at that high level of competition, like you said, not to knock any of the Russian leagues or anything, but obviously the most elite players in the world are playing in the NHL. I don't know. I think it was good for him to maybe go over to Europe. Yeah, he doesn't have the numbers that he might have on his actual record because they don't count professional hockey elsewhere, but at the same time, look at how he's playing now. Add 3 or 4 more years in the NHL of that level of competition. Maybe he doesn't have the spring in his step like we've seen. So I think being over there and then finally coming back, and at least for him from a personal level, it was good for him.
Well, that said, I think we're going to wrap it up. Real quick, let's just say what we're excited about coming up this week in the NHL. I'm excited for another outdoor game, more so for the alumni game, though. I'll admit it now. I'm kind of geeking out on this, so I'm excited to see that alumni game between the Red Wings and the Avalanche. I wonder if Claude Lemieux and Chris Draper will have a play fight, kind of like how Patrick Kane and John Scott did, or how Dino Ciccarelli and Dennis Savard did.
I think Joey Koser's playing in that game, too.
Ooh, well then, maybe not. Anything you're looking forward to?
The only highlight of my week is, what do they call it? The night you love to hate, Wednesday night rivalry. Penguins are on against the Bruins.
Oh, the Battle of Black and Gold. 2 teams that Jaromir Jagr has played for. Who are the Pittsburgh Penguins and Boston Bruins? Correct. Okay, well, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.